And welcome or welcome back from wherever and whenever you're listening. This is Season 1, Episode 6 of my guest list pod, The Interview Shows. I'm Darren. If you're new to the show, this is how it works. Each episode, I invite a guest creator onto the show and we count down a top 10 list in a topic of their choice. Along the way, we take breaks and ask them questions to delve a little deeper into their world and get to know them and their work a little better. If you'd like to get in contact with me or submit suggestions, ideas, or your own top 10 for the show, you can get in touch at my guest list pod pretty much everywhere you look. All the links are also in the show notes each week, so you can check there as well. If you would like to review the show, go to my Love the Podcast link that will automatically display the review platforms available to you on your device. It's a nifty little extra that is part of the package when you sign up at mypodcastreviews.com. My Podcast Reviews aggregates all your ratings and reviews from a number of sources and all the individual countries' iTunes pages and displays them for you in one place. Much easier than checking through them one by one yourself. Go check out mypodcastreviews.com and I'd be grateful if you could please use my affiliate link when you join to let them know who sent you. So today I'm chatting with a very personable guy from the Big Apple. Sean Lyons and I had been talking about doing a show for quite a while, but it wasn't until January that we could both work our schedules together. Luckily, we were able to work it out, as this episode was both fun to do and even more fun to listen back to when I was editing. Sean was a brilliant guest and made the episode a pleasure to do. I think you'll enjoy it as much as I did, so sit back and relax and prepare to enter the world of The Sean L. Show.
Hello and welcome to The Sean L. Show. Intimate conversations about music, sex, and life in New York City. My guest today is me, bitch. I'm the guest. I am doing a solo podcast today.
And on this week's episode, I interview another podcaster that I met through a Facebook podcasters group. And I don't think he'll be too upset with me if I say that his show is not probably one I would normally have been drawn to. It doesn't really sit in my sweet spot of hockey, the paranormal, true crime, trivia, or politics, which account for most of what I listen to on a regular basis. However, fortunately for me, I was looking for interesting people and interesting shows to collaborate with, and Sean Lyons and his podcast definitely fit that brief. Sean produces and hosts a podcast out of New York City called The Sean L. Show, which is now entering its third season. The tagline for the show is Intimate Conversations about Music, Sex, and Life in New York City. It's primarily a gay comedy podcast, but it also focuses heavily on music. From what I can gather from a little light stalking on the internet, Sean is a proud New Yorker, seems to be always impeccably dressed, and has a knack for being photographed with celebrities like Kelly Ripa, Gloria Estefan, and Diana Ross. And you know we're going to talk about that last one for sure. He has engaging and yet disarming voice that he uses in conjunction with a professional interview technique to bring you some very entertaining interview shows. He also has a loyal group of friends that make some of the less structured episodes a laugh riot to listen to. And for me, they were both informative and eye-opening, as are the advice column style shows. Sean's show celebrates and explores the funny, the serious, and interesting parts of his life and the LGBTQA community, with a healthy dose of diva worship thrown in for good measure. So without further ado, I am finally excited to welcome Sean Lyons to my guest list pod.
Thank you so much, Darren. That was a wonderful intro. I think I need to hire you to be my publicist.
Thank you very much.
Great.
I appreciate that.
You really nailed the spirit of what I'm trying to do with the podcast. Thank you so much for that. It's great to be here with you.
And as I was mentioning to you just before we started the podcast, how are things in New York at the moment?
Things in New York are grim but optimistic. We are excited to have a new presidential administration. We're really excited to have Joe and Kamala in Washington now, taking over the reins. So we're trying to get everyone vaccinated, and it looks like it's going to take a long time. So we have to hunker down because we have a long time still ahead of us. with COVID. So it's a dark time, but we're trying to, press forward and keep our spirits up as best we can with, a little bit of humor and grit, which is what New Yorkers are, known for.
The Big Apple spirit, I guess. So
yes, exactly.
Fantastic. Look, for people that don't know who you are, haven't listened to your show, give me the Sean Lyons story, where you were born, raised, and obviously you now live in New York. But give me an idea of who you are.
Yes. Okay. So I was born and raised in Connecticut, born in Hartford, Connecticut, and raised in the bucolic suburbs of Hartford, Connecticut, in Simsbury, a town called Simsbury. Yeah. It was a lot of fun, but it was a little bit too slow paced for me, and I craved the big city living. Also, as a gay guy, it doesn't offer as much diversity there in Connecticut, so I definitely wanted to move to New York City to find more of my tribe, as you might say. So I went to college also in Connecticut. I went to the University of Hartford, the Hart School of Music, and I majored in performing arts management. Dionne Warwick is a fellow alum of the Hart School of Music. Yes. And so I moved to New York City about 5 years ago, and have been living here ever since, and just started this podcast last summer. I was in between jobs, and I was looking for a creative outlet and a way to sort of express myself, and that's when I started the Sean L. Show, with the help, as you mentioned, of some great close friends who were, cheering me on the whole way and were really excited about this endeavor that I was taking, and had the generosity to share their stories and their humor as well on the podcast, and really made it special. So, and made it what it was. So that's sort of how that happened. So that's you in a nutshell. a little nutshell. And I am diva obsessed. I love music. It is my favorite thing.
I couldn't tell.
Yeah. If you give me any scenario in your life, if you're going through a breakup, if you're having a joyous moment, if you give me like a few bullet points, I will create a 3-hour playlist for you and have it by the end of the day. Like, I love to put a playlist together, carefully curated to people's events in their life. I do one for Gay Pride every year that I release in June, which is Pride Month here in New York City, and many other U.S. cities celebrate Pride in June, because it's the anniversary of the Stonewall riots that happened here in New York City. So I love to put a playlist together. I love music. My favorite, as you mentioned, is the divas. But I really love all types of music. I love to connect with people on what their favorite music is. So that's the other thing that's important to note about me. I worked in the music industry for a few years. I found it very draining. Okay. So it's not what I do now, but, it really, it's been a major passion point in my life for sure.
So that playlist that you do, is it on Spotify?
It is, yes. Okay. It's on Spotify. The link is in my Instagram bio. So if anyone wants to find me on Instagram, I'm at Sean L. Show. And the link in my bio takes you to my podcast, but it also takes you to several of my playlists that I've curated on Spotify. I love Spotify as a platform, and so all my curated playlists are there, including the annual Pride playlist that I do.
Oh, great. That's good. I'll give it a listen, definitely. So, are you in Manhattan?
I work in Manhattan, but I live in Astoria, which is in the borough of Queens. Yep. And it's funny. I don't know what you know of U.S. geography, and you're like, yes, I know where that is. But
I do. Yeah.
I'm over explaining it. I apologize.
No, that's fine. No, I actually I spent 6.5 weeks in the States on my honeymoon. And one of my
very cool.
Yeah, one of my favorite places to go was New York, and we actually went down to Soho, and there was a little store we went in there. It was called Dorothy's Closet, and we met a guy who was so nice, and he gave us an idea on, you know, things to look out for and go see, and, you know, other things that people normally don't probably go and see in New York that are good to see. We went and had lunch in a park in Soho, and when you could go up the Twin Towers and Empire State, and the only thing was the Guggenheim was closed. So we came all that way, and the Guggenheim was closed. But
yeah, that's amazing, and you did the right thing. I mean, that's the way to travel. I think anywhere in the globe that you go is to find a fun local and just get their opinion of what to see, because you'll see the city through their eyes, which is always, I think, so much more magical than hitting some of those tourist spots. So I think that's really great. I'm so glad you got to spend some time in New York, and through sort of a local's point of view too, because it's so magical, and there's so many neighborhoods here, and they all have such a different and unique personality, and they all have their own sort of architecture. And so, you know, I spend so much time in Astoria where I live, and then I spend a lot of time when pre-COVID, I spent a lot of time in Chelsea and Flatiron and Hell's Kitchen, where a lot of the gay bars are and the restaurants are that I love. But that's only 3 of the incredible neighborhoods we have here. So anytime I go to a different neighborhood that's here, it almost feels like I'm a tourist in my own city. So I love that about New York. Like, I can just go get lost in, a neighborhood that I don't go to often, and find a new bar or a new restaurant. And so I've been here for almost 6 years now, and I'm still marveling at everything it has to offer.
I guess we didn't get a chance to probably go into a lot of the boroughs. We stayed on Manhattan. But through, like, I'm a bit of a Sylvester Stallone fan, and you learn about Hell's Kitchen and things like that through, you know, his life, and obviously in movies and things like that, there's a lot set in New York. So, you know, we're down here in Australia, we're a long way from anywhere, but through movies and pop culture, we get to learn about, especially America through pop culture, about stuff like that. And yeah, it's cool. And it's cool that someone that actually lives in America and lives in New York can still have that experience of feeling like a tourist in his own city, which is great.
Yes, absolutely. And I will say this about New York. It is a struggle to live here in every way that you can imagine. It's a struggle financially. It's a struggle physically. Like, it is just exhausting to live here. It's hard.
Yeah.
To navigate the subways and just the amount of walking we do. And we don't have cars, most of us, so we're exposed to the elements at all times. So you have to really have a love affair with the city to put up with all of the grief that it gives you. And I find that for myself, it is still worth it every day, even in COVID. I mean, COVID is one element that has made me question it a little bit, because the apartments we live in here are generally small. I'm in Astoria, so mine's a little bit bigger than most.
Yeah.
But, if you move out to the boroughs, you get a little bit more space. But generally, our apartments aren't designed to be lived in. They're designed to be places where we keep our clothes and we sleep. And the city is where we live. We go and we live in the theater and in the bars and in the parks and all of the beautiful, and in the museums. I mean, there's so much here. And so that's why you come here. So COVID has definitely been a challenge. It's been, a little bit somber, but I just still am in love with the spirit of this city and the diversity of this city every day.
That's fantastic. And to be honest, that's a perspective that I probably haven't or didn't think about, the fact that New Yorkers do live their lives in New York, not so much in their houses or their apartments. The apartments, like you said, that's where I go home to, sleep and sometimes, and, store my clothes, and you eat and experience the city pretty much on a constant basis, which is pretty cool.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's unique. When I look at what my money can buy me in other cities, it's a little bit crazy.
I can imagine.
But, it's worth it. It's worth it.
Okay. With your show, this is something I usually ask everyone, was there a specific aha moment that you went, this is why I want to start a podcast, this is what's missing, or was it just boredom, or was it something, a niche you wanted to fill?
You know, I was just taking in the conversations that I was having with my friends here in the city. And I think that we all have such interesting lives as gay men in New York City. I thought that that would be a really interesting topic for a podcast. And I don't think there's necessarily a lack of podcasts from a gay man's point of view or anything like that. So there are plenty out there, but I also love music. And like I said earlier, I love to connect with people on the music that they love. And so I thought if I could combine those sort of two favorite topics and get people's funny sex and dating stories, as well as getting, you know, what are you listening to? That's kind of the question that I try to start all my interviews with. As the podcast has evolved, I've sometimes gotten away from it, but I do like to dig in and see, you know, what music is driving you, because it's a common thing. Even if it's not necessarily the music I like, everybody has music that they love and return to. And it's such an emotional thing that we all have and share. So that, I think, is the one unique thing that sets my podcast apart, is bringing the music element in. And I really have enjoyed getting to feature my friends and their funny stories about their dating and sex lives here in the city, because I think they are very unique. And also, I think that I wanted to have some really frank and sometimes graphic conversations about sex, because I think that sometimes it's still taboo, and I think that we don't talk about it bluntly sometimes in the way that we should.
Yeah.
I think in some ways too that women have almost taken some autonomy and ownership over their sex lives with shows like Sex and the City. And, you know, they talk about their experiences and challenges and different things a lot. And I feel like men are a little bit more shy about,
Yes. Yeah.
You know, what happens in our sex lives, even gay men. Like, we like to have, you know, a lot of bravado about our sex lives and this and that. But I think that sometimes it's fun to find the commonality in the shared experiences of what's not going well, what's hilarious, what is, you know, what are you experiencing? So I wanted to bring that too, and take a little bit of the shame out of our sexuality, and just and add a little bit of humor in there too. So it's multifaceted for sure.
Yeah, and I think you've done all that. And like I said, your show is probably not something I would have naturally looked for. But once I did find it and, you know, listen to a few episodes, it's very, very funny. And I have a whole new vocabulary now. And so, and speaking of which, you were talking about your friends and your experiences. Is it Mike and Aaron?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I always thought it was Aaron, but maybe it's just the accent. And then I don't know where I saw it, but I realized it was Aaron and not Aaron.
Yeah.
So they're on your show a lot. They're guests in some of the, as I said, less structured shows. Who are they?
Yes. So Mike and Aaron are longtime friends of mine. Mike, I met in Connecticut when we both lived in Connecticut. When I was at the University of Hartford studying music management, my minor at one time was music performance, and I had to take a music theory class, and he tutored me in music theory because it's quite challenging. There's a lot to know there. It's almost like a math or a science music. Yeah. So he's an incredibly talented vocalist in his own right, and also graduated with a major in music. So we became friends through just being gays in the very small gay scene in Connecticut, but then also we had this commonality of music. So we became fast friends that way. He moved to the city before I did, and was living here with the guy that he met and fell in love with, Aaron. And they were living together and needed a roommate at the exact same time I was looking to move to the city. So I moved in with them, and they are both just my best and closest friends in the city. Aaron is he's a fashion stylist, a photographer, and an influencer on Instagram. So as I've started this podcast, the two of them have been such a I say that they're like my uncredited executive producers because they've really been my cheerleaders.
Yeah.
And, they've been my sounding board when I have different ideas about how I want to market the podcast, who I want to bring on, what kinds of questions I want to ask, all kinds of things. So they have been invaluable, both as friends, but also as creatives. So I've just really enjoyed the collaboration with them quite a bit.
I think they're actually really funny too. And when you do those episodes together, they are a laugh right there. And
yes.
It's really good that you include them because it makes for an interesting show. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's get into your topic for this week. And normally I ask someone why they picked the topic that they did, but I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind, considering your gushing over music and your love of music, which is totally understandable. So your topic this week is top 10 diva albums of the 1990s.
Yes.
So, big surprise there, coming out of left field. But so I have one question. So what makes a diva?
Such a good question. So I think that it is an unparalleled talent. So first of all, they have to have talent above and beyond, what a lot of other people can do. So that's step one. But then they also have to have charisma. They have to take up presence. They're the type of person that when they walk into a room, like it just feels like all the oxygen goes in their direction and all eyes are on them because they're a presence. It's that charisma. It's a fashion sense. It's a stage presence. Because there are so many people on the planet that are so incredibly gifted and talented, musically and otherwise, that can sing amazingly or can dance amazingly. There's amazing songwriters. There's beautiful women. There's so many different things that are tiny elements of what makes a diva, but a diva has all of them as well as a presence. It's that ability to capture someone's imagination and hold the attention of a whole room.
Yeah.
So that's what the difference is. It's the whole package.
No problems. All right. Okay. So that out of the way, let's get into your first pick, your number 10. You said
I'm so excited.
These aren't in any sort of order you said, but I sort of put them, I reversed the order so that we can count down from 10. I thought that the order that you've got them in here is pretty good and pretty close to what you'd rank them at, or?
Okay, I think so. So. And I even forget, like I pretty much know what I gave you, but there's a few, like I think I have like 6 to 8 really like top ones. So I'm excited to see what I even emailed you a month ago.
All right.
But I'm sure I'll have no problem just waxing poetic about all of them.
All right. Not a problem, which is good. Look, I'll give you the first one. Then number 10 is Brandy, 7, Never Say Never.
That's a great number 10. That's probably where I would put that. So that album came out late 90s. The 90s were such a rich time for pop and R&B music. I think it's still, I was a kid and people say that the music that you listen to as a kid is the music that sticks with you. So maybe that's why I have such a nostalgic feeling, but I really do think the 90s were a rich time.
They were.
Brandy collaborated with, Dark Child, Rodney Jerkins on that album, as well as, one of his proteges, songwriters and producers that has since passed away tragically in a car accident, LaShawn Daniels. And they both were like just brilliant producers. And that album, top to bottom, is just such an encapsulation of the 90s R&B music scene. And there's so many great songs on that album, from Angel in Disguise to Almost Doesn't Count, You Don't Know Me, and the massive hit that just was like the global worldwide hit, Have You Ever, which is probably what people think about when they think of Brandy. So I love that album.
when you gave me this topic, I thought to myself, all right, not really in my wheelhouse, but doesn't have to be. It's about you, obviously, and you counting down your 10, but I like to be able to comment here or there. And I thought, what am I going to do with divas? But then I looked at it, and between my wife and myself, we have 8 of the 10 albums that you've got, or at least 8 of the 10 performers that you've got. We have CDs or albums of theirs.
And that makes me so happy.
So, and then when we looked through it, we found other things like Donna Summer and all this other stuff. And, it was funny. So, I'm glad I can at least appreciate. And Brandy, I remember Brandy, she's probably the youngest of the group that you've given me. I think she was 94.
I think so.
When she first started.
Yeah.
So. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Will you let me know which albums you didn't have? I would be curious to know which ones I may have introduced you and your wife to.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. Okay. So Toni Braxton is your number 9. Secrets is the album. So gorgeous woman.
Gosh.
Oh my God.
Yes. I just think that she has such a unique voice. There's nobody on the music scene that has that type of voice. It's so deep and husky and sensual. And it's another one of those albums, and that's a Babyface collaboration on that album, who also another producer, songwriter that owned the 90s. The songs on that album, You're Making Me High, Unbreak My Heart.
Unbreak My Heart.
I Don't Want To. Yeah. I Love Me Some Him. It's just, she even has a collaboration on there. It's called How Could an Angel Break My Heart? And it's just about how she was so in love with this guy and she never saw the breakup coming. And Kenny G plays the saxophone on it. So it doesn't really get more 90s than Toni Braxton and Kenny G. Yeah. And the album artwork is beautiful too. It's just her with her hair sort of wet and slicked back, and she's just stunning. Yeah. So I mean, that's another, if you're going to do an album, even outside the realm of divas, even if you did like top albums of the 1990s, I think that, Secrets would have to be on there. And I think that that's what took her sort of from being like, from one level of like an up and coming star to like a bona fide superstar, because she had a lot of hits before that with like You Mean the World to Me, Another Sad Love Song. And when this came out with Unbreak My Heart, it just catapulted her to like a new level of superstardom.
Well, Unbreak My Heart was probably the first time I actually ever heard of Toni Braxton, and we probably didn't have a lot of her music on the radio down here as well. But when that came out, everyone was very aware who Toni Braxton was. And then they saw her as well, and she's such a gorgeous woman. And she's the whole package. The marketing must have been so easy for her manager. So, look, it's not one of the albums. This is one of the albums we don't have. So this is probably something I'm going to go back onto Spotify and have a listen through the rest of the album, because Unbreak My Heart's probably the only song I really know from her.
Okay. I'm excited. For you to listen to it. Some other ones that I love on there. There's a song called Come On Over Here. That's the song that kicks the album off. I love that song.
Okay.
And then there's like this very sensual song called Talkin' in His Sleep. And it's about this, she's sleeping with this guy, and in his sleep, he's talking about someone else. Like he's having dreams about someone else. And it's kind of a story song where she's not really singing. She's giving you like a narration, almost like a spoken word are the verses. And then the choruses are sung. And I love it. I love it.
Okay. I'm going to check that out then.
One of my top 10 diva albums of the 90s.
There you go. All right. Number 8. Now, again, like there's not a woman on here that isn't gorgeous, so I'll just stop saying that. So, but number 8 is Shania Twain, Good Canadian Girl. Come On Over is the album.
Oh my gosh. Now that's like probably one of the top albums of all time as far as like record sales go. And I don't know like where that lands. I think it's up there with the behemoths of record sales, which are like the Beatles, Elvis, Whitney, Mariah, and then like this album. And maybe, unfortunately, some of the 90s boy bands, I think, are up in that stratosphere too. I think that there's some diamond selling albums for NSYNC or something like that. But
that's a lot of 14-year-old kids around. So.
Yeah. But I mean, that album from Shania Twain, again, it's the thought of these albums that don't have any filler on them. I think that a lot of times there's especially in pop music, which is a lot of the albums on this list. And Shania, a lot of them are R&B pop. Shania's country pop. But I think this is her first pop album to me. I think that before this, she was truly country.
Yeah.
Come On Over is really a pop album with a country twist. It's kind of like when Taylor Swift recently ventured into 1989, and now from that point on, she's just pop. But so it really was a huge crossover moment. And when you listen to that album top to bottom, there are so many hits on that album, from the title track, Come On Over, Man, I Feel Like a Woman, Rock This Country, That Don't Impress Me Much, You've Got a Way with Me.
Yeah. No fillers, like you said.
You're Still the One was a massive hit. And it's these massive career defining hits. And there's just a plethora of them on one album, which is wild because if you look at her catalog, she hasn't even released that many albums. Her whole career is based on this huge album because she did I think maybe one album after that, and then just had a terrible personal sort of struggle with her ex-husband and disappeared for a decade. And now she's touring and doing Vegas residency. And it's largely, if you look at her set list, it's probably 80% that whole album. So it's just insane. Yeah. So, I had to include that one. And I wanted to mix up the genres a little bit too. If I had to rank genres in terms of what I love musically, country would be at the rock bottom, but I am a sucker for divas, and Shania really won me over with that one. And it's really good songwriting, beautiful melodies. So yeah, absolutely amazing.
Some pretty nice film clips too. So
yes, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Look, number 7, before we get into some more questions, number 7, they don't get too much bigger than this person either. Madonna, Ray of Light. So that was 98, I think.
Yes.
Late
yes.
90s.
I forgot that I put that on there. I'm not a huge Madonna fan, but I think when I made this list, I was probably thinking that how do you do a top divas of the 90s and not include Madonna? And it's true because
for sure
she really is one of the top ever. Ray of Light, what I love about this album is Madonna really is the queen of reinvention, and she really took it to a new level with this album because I think her previous albums were erotica, which she was extremely sexualized. To her credit or discredit at the time, I think it was largely panned, but in retrospect, I think we look at her as being quite brave and really moving pop culture forward a little bit and out of prudishness. Now we look at that and we're oh, good for you. But I think at the time it wasn't really well received. And then Bedtime Stories, which was largely R&B, a lot of Babyface production on that album, which was, I think, trying to compete with the divas Whitney and Toni and Mariah. Yeah. She was trying to, punch into that class a little bit. So with Ray of Light, she introduced, a new genre sort of to the masses, which was this sort of techno sound, but it was done through ballads. It wasn't, techno dance.
Yeah.
So the lead off single, Frozen, is really a techno song, but it's a ballad. And the first song on the album, Substitute for Love, again, a ballad, a lot of lush, beautiful ballads on that album, but they're done in a techno style. And it's really this ambient musical style that I don't think she created or invented, but Madonna has this incredible knack of taking something like voguing, for instance, that's really underground, and she can, funnel it through her creative vision and spread it to the masses. And so with Ray of Light, her and William Orbit, really did that. And I think the finished product is amazing. And of course the the major singles, Ray of Light, the title track, incredible single, Power of Goodbye, Frozen. And then there's a song on there that was not a single, and it's called To Have, Not to Hold. And it's just one of my favorite songs. And I just love the percussion in it and everything. So yes, great album.
Yeah, no, look, she, like you said, to have the longevity that she's had for over many years, she's reinvented herself every decade, and she stayed relevant. So, which is great. And she's a fantastic performer. So,
yes, very much so. Very much so.
Okay, let's take the first break. Let's get into some questions. And
all right.
I guess one of the questions I wanted to ask was, as I said, you do a few different shows. You do interview show, you do a show with your friends, and then you do an advice column. Of the different types of shows that you do, what's your favorite?
Oh, that's a good question. So I love the shows that I do with my friends because we have some cocktails, and it's just very loose and it's easy. And it's not a heavy lift for me because it's so conversational. And so it's just very comfortable, and the conversation flows. And before I know it, our time is up and the content we have is just golden. So those, I think, would be my favorite. Lately, I've been interviewing some high profile guests. So those are very interesting as well, but they're a little bit more stressful because I want to ask them provocative questions that maybe no one else has asked them before. And I want it to be interesting and original, but I also want to create a little bit of that rapport that you're used to with the episodes with my friends. I want to kind of still have that vibe. Yeah. So those are a little bit more challenging, but I like to do those as well. The advice column show happened because I had booked a guest, a high profile guest, and they canceled. And I didn't cancel. I was recording with a studio. I didn't cancel my session in time, and I had paid for it. And so there I was. And so I decided to pull some funny, or just interesting questions off of Reddit. Yep. I answered people's questions from Reddit, and it turned out all right. I thought it was all right.
Good episode for sure.
Thank you so much. So that was sort of a one-off there, but I also love to talk about politics. I love to talk about serious things that are affecting our world, and the feedback that I've gotten through my metrics is that those episodes don't do that well. People don't necessarily want to hear me go on and on about politics. And so I've taken the feedback. I get it. I think that we have so much of that from Twitter and cable news and the newspapers, and it's just, we're bombarded with it, and it's a very heavy time. And I think in our history as Americans and also globally, it's just very heavy. I think people are looking for something else from my podcast, and so I've heard the feedback, and I will give that to them, and I'm excited to keep doing that.
Yeah, look, I think people from, I know with my listening to your show, it's something I come to as an oasis from all that other stuff, all that politics and things like that. It's more, fun and frivolity that, and the dynamic between you and your friends that's interesting, and it's disarming, it's informal, it's very funny, and that's what I come to the show to listen to. And so, I listen to political shows that are dedicated political shows. I probably don't need to hear it from every show that I listen to. And those are the metrics that you've probably received. And at least you've listened, and you're going to go with what's, what's making everybody happy.
Yes.
So, speaking of your interviews, who's been your most gratifying interview so far?
I did an interview with a drag artist here, Britta Filter, and she is a drag queen from the New York City drag scene. And I had seen her shows here in New York at a bar that is no longer open. Unfortunately, we lost it to COVID, called Therapy. And she is a huge amount of energy and positivity and hilarity. Just a performer that just captures your imagination. Very much all the qualities that make a diva. I mean, all the qualities that make an outstanding drag queen. I think Britta embodies them.
Yep.
And so she got cast on the very popular show, RuPaul's Drag Race. I don't know how much does that permeate Australian pop culture? Do you have that?
We know of the show. It's on cable TV. From memory, I don't think it's on free to air. It's probably on like Foxtel or something like that. But it's obviously it's a bit of a niche market, so we don't see it a lot.
Yes. Okay.
But we know of it.
Gotcha. So Britta went on the show, and it's through Instagram. She had done like sort of a come up on stage for this trivia, and I had like been on stage and done this music trivia with one of my friends, Lucas, that was on the podcast, and I just killed him at this trivia, and it was strip name that tune. And I mean, he was foolish to play that against me, who is the music expert. So he ended up completely naked on the stage with an ice bucket covering his dick. So we had that experience with Britta, which was hilarious. And then I had sort of kept in touch with Britta on Instagram. And so I really had an affection for her and her work. And so she got cast on RuPaul's Drag Race, and we were all so excited. Anytime a New York queen gets on that show, we're, really rooting for them. And did not have a great turn on the show. She sort of let her insecurities get the better of her and was a little bit of a bully to one of the other contestants. And I may say rightfully so, to be honest. I don't know if I'm partial because I'm Team Britta, but I thought some of the things she said were valid. But it wasn't a great showing for her because she was a little bit of a bully. So she ended up, in turn, the fandom. There's a huge, this show has crossed over into mainstream pop culture here in the States, where it's not just the gay community that's watching it. It's become quite a huge sensation. Okay. So she ended up getting really, really bullied online. And so my show was the first interview that she did after that experience. And so I was really honored to be able to talk to her about that. She revealed some very personal things, and that episode got covered in Out Magazine and Pink News in the UK. And so that was a really gratifying interview for me. And
Fantastic.
I was really privileged that she shared those personal stories with me.
That's great. And I did listen to that episode actually too. So it was, I knew there was a little bit of a kerfuffle about what happened on the show. And obviously I learned a lot more by listening to your show about what happened. And it's, I think with the big personalities that they are, I think the big attitude comes with it, I guess, as well. So it's probably hard to, be subtle when you're in drag, I guess. So, so things, there's going to be conflict and different dynamics between people. And I guess it didn't go her way, unfortunately, on the show. So,
yeah. And unfortunately, I think that, what made me sad about it is that as a person, she's very generous and humble and kind. And so I was sad that the negative things, which is what they really edited out, to make the show, those are the things that came out on the show, which was really, really her insecurities getting the better of her. I was disappointed that that's how she came across, because that's not truly who she is. I mean, it is to some extent, right? Because it did happen, but there's so much more. And she really, after the show, put a lot of her time into politics and advocacy work, and did a lot of, get out the vote and work with phone banking and really encouraging people in swing states to vote and help get Biden elected so that we could turn a corner in our politics here towards a better future for ourselves. Yeah, of course. So she's done some really great things. Yeah.
So she was a great interview. Who is your dream interview?
My dream interview, I always say, is Gloria Estefan. And we affectionately refer to her on the podcast as Tia Gloria.
Auntie Gloria.
Yes. So I've had the privilege to meet Gloria on many occasions as a big fan of hers. She's very generous with her time to her big fans and lets us come backstage and hang out and at different concerts, and she's just very generous. And now she has a list of us, and I don't know, it's like Santa Claus. I don't know how she got this list of fans. But there's a huge list of fans. If you go to her Twitter, every day she's wishing several people a happy birthday. And those are like her biggest fans that she's developed. Yeah, she's developed a relationship with over the years. And I'm on her list of birthdays. I don't know, one of the fans must have gone into Facebook and somehow documented all of our birthdays and sent it to her. I don't know who did it. I to this day, it's happened for several years, but every year on my birthday, Gloria Estefan's on Twitter wishing me a happy birthday. And each birthday greeting is different from year to year and from person to person. Yeah. Like she really
personalizes.
I mean, who at that large of a celebrity, who's made that much of an impact on the world is taking that time to interact with their fans and really forge relationships. So I think she's so great. So I would love to interview her about her albums and, I'd love
to hear it, actually. I think it'll be a fantastic interview. I think you do really well with it. So I hope that happens. So
Thank you so much.
Thank
you. We're putting that energy into the environment.
It's out there. So exactly, we're going to make it happen. Positive thoughts. So,
thank you.
You mentioned getting on stage with Britta, but there's one photo on your Facebook. As I said, we'd talk about Diana Ross later. You're on stage with Diana Ross. What happened?
I am on stage with Diana Ross. Okay, so I also am a huge fan of Diana Ross, and that might be an understatement. When I was in college, I was living in Connecticut with my parents, and I was like, gosh, this is a little boring. There's a beautiful venue in Simsbury called the Simsbury Meadows, and every year, the Hartford Symphony Orchestra does a residency there in the summer, and they get pop acts as like sort of one-offs. Harry Connick Jr. has played there. Willie Nelson has played there. So they've got some really great names, but it's not consistent. Some years they won't have anyone. And so I was trying to just say, like, who could be an amazing, huge act that could come here and really put this place on the map? And so Diana Ross is that name for me. I'm a huge fan. I've gone to many of her concerts. And I started a campaign, Bring Diana Ross to Simsbury. And it still exists on Facebook. So I really put my all into this in college. And at the time, she was touring. I mean, she was touring a lot up until COVID. And then, no one's touring now. But I was going to a ton of her shows, and I met this incredible community of fans. And one of the fans, Greg, is quite close to her. He's been following her since the Supremes days when he was a kid. And really has forged a personal relationship with her. And he kind of let her know who I was. And so she really has a familiarity with the people that come to her shows often, and she'll see us in the audience and wave to us and acknowledge us. And she really interacts personally with her audience as well. And so I was one of those people, and she knew me as well from the campaign, which she's a savvy businesswoman. So I was working with different promoters to get her to go there, local promoters in Connecticut. I won't name them. But they didn't get her an offer that was good enough. And I don't have the money to pay her personally. Yeah. So she never did come to Simsbury, but she was quite aware of like the campaign. Like she knows who I am, and she's been very sweet to me. So one show that I went to in Boston, she was doing Upside Down. She likes to pull people out of the audience. And so she was making eye contact with me. We were dancing back and forth. And she said, do you want to come up? And then she looked around for stairs, because some of the venues, she plays a lot of like Broadway style theaters around the country. Some of the venue has stairs and some do not. This one did not. And so she invited me up and then looked for stairs and then sort of took it back because she saw that I wasn't going to be able to get up there. And so I mimed her. I said, I can get up there. Because I had never, other fans had been called on stage before. Yeah. I never had been able to get on stage. And so I said, I could get up there. And she just like gave me like a sly look and like nodded her head. And so I leaped onto the stage And security came to get me because the venue security does not know that she does this. Like she's a touring action. It's not a residency. And so they're trying to tackle me and save Diana Ross from this overambitious fan. And she gives them that no, you know, he's allowed. I've invited him, and I got to dance with Diana Ross to Upside Down in Boston. It was incredible. I've been on stage with her again since then a few times and gotten to sing with her as well. So she's been very sweet to me and knows me when she sees me in the audience. So it's a very cool relationship that I've been able to have with her as well. A legend.
That's fantastic.
So it's still surreal to talk about. It's very cool.
That's great. Look, what was the feeling like when she first, you know, noticed you in the, you know, and waves to you in the crowd? That must be pretty exhilarating.
Yeah. So the first real time was in Hartford. I had launched this campaign, and one of the promoters booked the Hartford date, and he reached out to me to help him with local marketing. And he was like, I saw your Simsbury campaign. You must be so thrilled that she's coming to Hartford. And I was like, well, to be honest, like she's come to Hartford before. I was trying to get her to Simsbury, to this venue that I'm trying to like put on the map. So no, I wish that you had booked her in my venue that I'm trying to, you know, help. But that's when she really had an awareness about this campaign and the guy who started it. And I was doing a lot of cool, like, original content in tribute to her and things. And so that concert, she was looking for fans to sing a verse of Reach Out and Touch at the encore song that she does. And she had given me the mic, and I got to sing with her at that concert. And that was really, like, just my dad was in the audience, and that was just a moment that I will never forget. And so it's always surreal each time. But it feels like a friendship now, almost like a distant friendship. You know, it's very cool.
Yeah. Ah, fantastic. Okay. All right. So let's move on then. We'll move on to your 6 to 4 in terms of your top 10. Otherwise, we're going to be here for hours, which I wouldn't have any problem with, but people don't listen to those podcasts unless you're Joe Rogan. So, number 6 is Janet Jackson, Velvet Rope.
Ah, yes. Okay. So Velvet Rope, is important to me. I love Janet Jackson so much. She writes a lot of, most of her music, she writes with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. And I think that because she's such a performer, she has such a stage presence, such a look about her, she doesn't often get the credit for being the musician that she is. So, and the songwriter that she is. And the Velvet Rope, I think, is different than anything that was out at the time. It's not indicative of anyone really, period. It doesn't necessarily sound like the 90s. It just sounds like a standalone work of art. And I do think it's her best album of her career. Okay. And just because of the samples that they pull in, the things that they reference from the 70s and reinvent, you know, they sampled Joni Mitchell on that album. It's just a really special album. And she talks a lot about her struggles with depression and just being a gay kid growing up in, you know, rural Connecticut. In high school, I really struggled with depression a lot. And that album was really like my crutch. Like that's the album that I always go back to. And even as an adult, I just love to revisit it because the musicality of it is so good. The songwriting is so good. And one thing about Janet Jackson, a lot of people, she has a very thin voice. She's not a Whitney Houston or a Patti LaBelle. She's not belting. Sure. Yeah. But the musicality of her voice is incredible. And as a musician, as a singer, what she's able to do with her voice is really incredible. And if you listen to a Janet Jackson record, you'll hear maybe a layer of like 6 different harmonies, and they're all her. Okay. They're all her doing, and she writes those harmonies and sings them. So
that's crazy.
So if you really listen to the layers of a Janet Jackson record, it's very complex, more than people realize, for being a pop record. And so she's really an incredible musician. And I think that album really showcases that. And she does a lot of different vocalizing on that album that's really great. I love I Get Lonely. I think that's one of the best R&B records of her career and of the 90s. So I think she's sometimes underrated as a vocalist and as a songwriter because of who she is as a performer. She gives you so much visually that I think she's a little underestimated. So that would be my album recommendation.
Okay, so I know Velvet Rope, and I really haven't listened to it. 91 was a big year for me in terms of finding grunge, and I was listening to more Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and guys like that rather than probably the more poppy stuff. But I own Rhythm Nation, but that was 89, so it doesn't really make the 90s. But I loved Rhythm Nation. I thought that was like, apart from it had some really cool songs on it, but it had some stuff on it that was probably a little bit more experimental for her as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's one of the albums we do own, but we don't own Velvet Rope as such. So I might go back and give that another listen and maybe appreciate. Now that I've got a new way of looking at it, you've given me a new way of looking at it, I can appreciate it a little bit more.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of songs on there that are made for radio, like I Get Lonely, Go Deep, Together Again, really great singles. But there's a lot, the non-singles on that album. It's just really experimental. She has Vanessa Mae, who is like a classically trained violinist. It's just really, she goes into like some really cool things on that album that are just, there's a song called What About? That is like a hard rock song about domestic violence. So there's a song called Empty that is about meeting someone on the internet and falling in love with them, but it's empty because you're never going to meet them in person. And this is so many years before like the idea of catfish or anything like that. This is the years of the AOL chat rooms, and it actually starts with there's an interlude into that song that is like the dial-up tone when we used to have to like wait for the internet to dial up before we logged on. And so
56K modem.
It's just a really, yes, exactly. There's a song called Free Zone about, LGBT rights. There's a song called Rope Burn about experimenting with S&M. And so also I credit Janet Jackson with like a lot of my awakening a lot of my sexuality as well. So a lot of the topics that I talk about on my podcast sexually, Janet Jackson is probably where I learned a lot when I was a kid, just coming of age. So it's I think maybe her finest album. Rhythm Nation and the Janet album probably compete, but Velvet Rope for me is her best.
Okay, number 5. This is a pretty big one. Mariah Carey, Butterfly.
So when I think of Mariah Carey, Butterfly, that is the album that she would say is her favorite. And it's like the divorce album. So this is when she divorced Tommy Mottola. It's her first album where she had complete autonomy and creative control. And I just think about the music video where it's like a movie and she's kidnapped and she's in this mansion, and it's so much of it now that we know her story with Tommy Mottola, we see the symbolism easily. But at the time we didn't know. And she's in that mansion, and then she dives off the balcony into the water, and she's on a jet ski with Puff Daddy, and like the whole thing, it's so sexy. Like it's just very sexy. I think it's her most beautiful era. I love the way she looked in that era. And so I love the freedom in that she was able to really express herself as an artist, really take a deep dive into R&B and hip hop, because I think there was such an effort to push her down that, sort of whitewashed pop music, the adult contemporary. They wanted her on that Celine Dion track. Like they really wanted her to be, what Celine and Gloria Estefan were doing at that time, which was, amazing music, but it wasn't who she was. So that Butterfly album was the first time she got to be who she was. And, to a full out extent with, collaborations with like Bone Thugs and Harmony. And it's just a really good R&B pop album. And I love songs like Honey and Breakdown and The Roof, 4th of July. So many, again, it's an album with no filler. There's a Prince collab cover on there. It's just really, really good.
With a voice like that, it's hard to probably sing a bad song.
Yes, and also My All, the ballad My All, where she's like floating in the ocean in the music video, is about baseball superstar Derek Jeter, which just came out in her memoir, which is, I mean, people love that stuff, that tea.
All right, look, we're up to number 4. Well, I guess obviously going to be one of your favorites, Gloria Estefan-Destiny.
Ah, yes. Okay, so I think in the canon of Gloria Estefan's catalog, I think that she is best known for her work in the 80s. Conga, Rhythm Is Gonna Get You.
Miami Sound
you know,
Machine
some of her,
yeah,
exactly. Some of her amazing ballads, like Anything for You and things like that. But Destiny is, you know, after she never left Miami Sound Machine. It was always the same musicians, but Emilio, her husband, wanted to put her out front and be really the brand name. But she started to sort of make concept albums in the 90s. And Destiny falls in line with those concept albums. And the concept of Destiny is that it's an Afro-Cuban sound. So it's very tribal. And Cuban music has a lot of the cornerstones of Latin music that we think about, but it's also heavily influenced by African music.
Yeah.
And the drums.
Like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. A lot of the drum and percussion. Exactly. And so when you hear a song from the 80s, like Rhythm Is Gonna Get You, it's really the fusion of, the Latin sound with 80s synth pop and also African influences there as well. So on Destiny, she took that to sort of its roots. And she's known for more her dance music, but there's a lot of beautiful ballads. And it's a truly Latin and African infusion on that album. And it's really unique and beautiful. And she wrote most of the songs on that album. And some of them are in collaboration with Diane Warren, who is one of the greatest songwriters we've ever had. And the Olympic theme, Reach, is on there, the 1996 Olympic theme, as well as some really fun songs, Party Time. And the title track is maybe one of my favorite songs, probably my favorite Gloria Estefan song, and maybe one of my favorite songs of all time. It's just so dramatic and soaring. Really, really good album.
It's funny, when I saw Gloria Estefan on there, I thought to myself that you might have picked Into the Light, because that's actually one of the CDs I own. And when I was at university, an elective that I was doing was Spanish, because half my heritage is Spanish. And but I didn't grow up with my family, so I was doing Spanish at university. And part of the way I would study comprehension would be to listen to artists singing in Spanish. And so I'd listen to Gloria Estefan songs that she sang in Spanish. So it brings back good memories.
I love that story. Yeah, Mi Tierra was probably her most famous Spanish album. But Into the Light is an amazing album because it's sort of her comeback after her bus accident where she almost died. Yeah. So that's definitely a special album. But musically, except for the title, well, I guess it's not the title track, but except for Coming Out of the Dark, a lot of that is very of the moment 90s pop that I think doesn't age necessarily. It doesn't age as well as some of the other ones. Even
Sex
her
in the
80s
90s.
ballad. Yes, exactly. Oh my gosh. Seal Our Fate and all of those, they're very, very timely.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure they hold up as well as some of her 80s work that is just iconic
I think
balladry and songwriting. And then Destiny really, because it's so conceptual, it can be from any era. And so I think for that reason, it ages very well. And I'm excited for you, if you haven't checked out Destiny, to take a listen to that one.
I will, definitely. And I dare say, I have heard a couple of songs from Destiny. I think Nayab's song. Is it Nayab or?
That one is from Into the Light as well.
Is that Into the Light? Okay, I'm not remembering
that's
correctly.
Actually, the lyrics to Nayib's song. So Nayib is her son, her firstborn child. They're very topical, and she's basically thinking to herself in the lyrics of the song, how am I going to help you navigate this world that is in so much turmoil and unrest? So still very topical. At the time that she wrote it, we obviously, the U.S. was in the first Gulf War.
Yes.
So still lots of turmoil. But that's a great That's actually one of the songs I would say from Into the Light that has aged really well.
Yeah.
Because, it's always topical, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's got to be almost 40 now, Naive.
Jeez,
So
makes me
yeah,
feel
it's
old.
crazy. Yeah. Yeah. And he has a child of his own. Gloria's a grandma now.
Oh, okay.
Abuela Gloria. Yeah.
All right. Let's get into the questions again, and then we'll get into your top three. This is what I'm going to do as my podcast is evolving. I obviously don't have a huge listener base or anything at the moment, but I'd love to let people know you're the first guest. Let the audience know who's coming on, when he's coming on, and I've offered up the opportunity to pose questions. So that's something I want to do going forward, and that's where this last part of the show will be dedicated to that. So I didn't know if I was going to get any questions, but fortunately I got a couple, so which is good. So I'll go through those now, and the first one is from Xander from the Xander and Stone podcast. It's a paranormal podcast, actually. So thank you, Xander, for sending through a question. He saved my bacon. So he poses the question of which famous straight man would you love to get a chance to dress up in drag? He voted for Trump. Not he voted for Trump, but he voted to dress Trump up.
Oh, that's funny. I mean, I personally would not like to see Trump in drag, because if it were up to me, I would never like to see Trump ever again. Like, I just absolutely would never like to see him again. But let's see. Oh my gosh, that's a really great question. Maybe someone that's like a very sexy movie star, a straight guy. That's a great question. Should I choose someone that would be funny if they had to be in drag?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh my God. You know who I would love to see a straight guy in drag would be Eugene Levy. He is. I think I would like to see Eugene Levy in drag. Those eyebrows. I mean, they would have to cover them up, but I think that he's so brilliant and so funny, and he's such an ally and an icon. I think he would be just a riot.
That's a great call.
Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. That is a great call. That's it. I'm just picturing that now. That's
Me too.
Okay, look, Xander has another one for you. He asked, do you know of any straight man that does drag? And he's asking to probably give us a clearer picture of, is drag associated or tied to sexuality, or is it just more of a performance art?
That's a great question. So I personally don't know of any straight guys that do drag, but I'm sure they're out there. I just don't know them. RuPaul used to have a show called Drag U, like as in Drag University, where they would take straight guys and they would dress them up in drag. The previous contestants of RuPaul's Drag Race would dress them up in drag, and they would have an opportunity to experience what that is like.
I haven't seen that.
But I think, yeah. I mean, I don't think it's tied to sexuality, actually. I actually don't think that it's tied to sexuality. So I think that it's an art form, and it's just a way to express the feminine side of yourself. So it's like a performance art. It's like any other type of acting or performing. So I think certainly it's open to straight men if they were interested in doing it. Because I think we all have like a masculine and a feminine, all of us. And I think that it's a lot more fluid than we even think. I think we sort of look at it in maybe some old-fashioned terms. So certainly it's an art form that's open to straight men. I know there's straight men out there that do it. I don't know them personally, or have seen them on TV, but I think it'd be really fun to have like a straight guy on RuPaul's Drag Race even, just to see what that dynamic would be like. Yeah. Cause it truly, it isn't tied to sexuality. It really is just a performance art. It's a type of performance art.
Well, I don't know what it's like in the States, but it doesn't take too much alcohol or too much encouragement to see a lot of straight men end up in their wives' dresses and things like that in photos on Facebook and embarrassing photos around. So I agree. There's probably a feminine side to everybody, obviously, and sometimes it's just about finding it. So.
Yeah, and I think as men, we're conditioned to sort of think that our softer side or our feminine side is some sort of like threat towards our masculine side. And that's just not true. I don't think that's true. So, but it becomes like a bit of silliness when we, it can. So it's funny how we express that. I think that as humans evolve, I think some of that will fall away. But yeah, there's a video I just saw on Facebook, and this little boy really wanted to dress up as Elsa from Frozen. Okay. And so the dad had the foresight to know that if he let his son dress up as Elsa from Frozen, his son would be terribly bullied. Yeah. So instead of sort of saying, no, you can't do that, that's not what boys do or any of that, he said, well, I mean, you're really in for it if you do this, so I'm not going to let you do this alone. So he got an adult Elsa costume, and he dressed up as Elsa, and they both went out dressed up as Elsa.
That's fantastic.
So, I mean, that to me is the height of masculinity, because he's not threatened at all by that Elsa. Yeah. He's a real man, and he's, going to bat for his son. So I think fantastic. I love that. I love that. So yeah, I don't think that drag is at all tied to sexuality.
Okay. I do have one question here. It's from ro.coco2019. Came in actually from Instagram, which is actually the only one I got from Instagram, but it was, hey, one's a start. He's asking, and I think you might know him somehow, how do you deal with the departure of your favorite French roommate? I've been truly plunged into a deep despair and depression. So I'm just taking it one day at a time. Right. And for those that haven't put it together yet, Rococo 2019 is my, recently departed French roommate who has, he's moved on to, live with his boyfriend in Hell's Kitchen. So he no longer lives with me. But when he did, we have a very special and close relationship because we quarantined together all through COVID and sort of survived a plague. So he will have the distinct distinction of being the person I survived COVID with. And in that time, we watched the whole of RuPaul's Drag Race every single season. We watched Schitt's Creek. We watched all kinds of things. And he would make little artisanal pizzas for me and cookies. So he is much missed in our home. Okay. In our apartment, yes. So, Rococo, thank you very much for sending in the question as well. So thanks to Xander and Rococo.
Thank you to Xander. I mean, those are really interesting questions, and I want to check out his podcast.
Yeah, it's really good.
Well.
Yeah, he and a girl from the States. He's actually in China. And
oh wow,
yeah, and they do a fantastic paranormal podcast, and I was really fortunate that he came up with a couple of really fantastic questions for you. And
I'm excited. I'm going to check that out.
Okay, so let's do the top three, the big three. So at number three, I don't know how. It's like choosing your favorite child, I guess, for you with these guys. But number three, you've put in Celine Dion, "Falling Into You."
Yes. Okay, so another album that was written, a lot of writing on this album by Diane Warren, who I mentioned, she wrote on Gloria Estefan's Destiny album. Any ginormous American smash hit song in the 90s, she had a hand in, and she wrote a lot of this album. I think the title track, also the massive hits, Because You Loved Me, and It's All Coming Back to Me Now.
And All By Myself. That was big here.
Yes.
Is that on that? Is that on that album?
That is on that album. I'm not sure if that's written by Diane Warren.
But sorry.
I mean, no. But that is a massive, massive hit from that album. So funny because like All By Myself and It's All Coming Back to Me Now, those songs are like 6 and 7 minutes each, which is way too long for like a standard pop song. But people loved them so, so much. And this is Celine Dion sort of at her height. And right before she did the Titanic song. And it's funny because before this album, she did Beauty and the Beast, the soundtrack song. And then she did Because You Love Me, which is from a movie that was released here, I think called Up Close and Personal. And It's All Coming Back to Me Now was also on a movie soundtrack. So when they offered for her to do the Titanic song, she didn't want to do it because she had done so many soundtracks that she was like, oh, I don't want to be, the soundtrack girl.
Yeah.
And then of course she did do it, and it was a massive, massive hit for her. But I've heard that she wasn't even crazy about the song.
Oh, okay.
And so the version that you hear is her demo. She only recorded it once, and it was so good that James Horner, yeah, I know. I imagine being that talented. James Horner, who did the music for Titanic, and did that song with her, he just kept the demo because it was that good. And of course, now that she's seen the film, she loved the film and of course loves the song that made her a zillionaire, I'm sure. But so she had done a lot of soundtrack songs just on that one album, Falling Into You. And it's a really good song. There's a lot of hidden gems in sort of the B-sides that weren't released. There's a song called Seduces Me that I love. There's like a fun song called Declaration of Love that's really fun. And then there's a song called Fly that's very touching that she dedicated to her niece who died of pediatric cancer. So it really is like a well-rounded, very good album.
That's fantastic. And look, you're a wealth of knowledge, obviously, with all this, which is it's great. I'm learning a lot, and
it's ridiculous, truly, Darren.
Look, there's one thing. There's one thing I do want to ask though. In terms of the top 10, no room for Christina Aguilera?
Well, I think her debut album was 99.
Yeah.
And I don't think her debut album was her best. It's a great pop effort. We get Genie in a Bottle. We get Come On Over. But I think her peak, I think, is really her second album, which is Stripped. And we get Dirty and like all Can't Hold Me Down and all those fun, like sort of raunchy Christina songs.
Yeah.
We also get like really sort of introspective songs like Fighter, which is like her take on rock and roll, which is great. And we get there's a song that she did with Alicia Keys called Impossible, which I think Christina has a true love for R&B and soul music. And I think through the trajectory of her career, she's tried to keep up with trends and done pop and done dance and all of this. But her voice is so soulful, and she really has a true love for, Etta James and soul music. She should really have stuck in that vein because she's great at it.
Yep.
And stop trying to chase what is commercial at any given moment. So to me, Stripped is like her penultimate album. So that was 2002. So it narrowly missed it.
Well, I'm not going to question you, so that's for sure. All right. So we're up to number 2. Number 2 is Diana Ross, Take Me Higher.
Take Me Higher. That is
95.
So Take Me Higher is like my theme song. It is such a joyful song. It's a house song, and I love that album. The first time I ever saw Diana Ross in concert, I was like 10 years old, and she opened her show with Take Me Higher, and it's so raucous and bombastic and it's just full out energy. It's so much fun. I recommend it to anyone. I still put it on Pride playlist today, and it holds its own with, anyone you can think of, from Ariana Grande to Cardi B to, whoever we're listening to of the day. That song still holds its own. So I love that song. And that album is a true, there's a tiny bit of every genre that Diana's good at. She really, throughout her career, has done a little bit of every genre. And so on that album, you have house music, you have a little bit of disco. She covers I Will Survive. You have a lot of really deep R&B stuff like If You're Not Gonna Love Me Right, which is a huge, great cut on that album. Don't Stop, which is sort of a sensual R&B cut. There's some great adult contemporary with songs like Voice of the Heart and Gone. And then there's some more spiritual stuff like Let Somebody Know and Only Love Can Conquer All. And then there's some beautiful jazz as well with songs like I Never Loved a Man Before and the bitterly sad I Thought That We Were Still in Love, which sort of ends the album. So she really, within like 11 songs, touches on every genre that she's really just excelled at.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of her ultimate albums. And in a career that started in, you know, the 60s with the Supremes and the 12 number ones that they had in the, I think it was like 7 years that they were together, to the disco smashes like Upside Down and I'm Coming Out and The Boss, and the ballads like Touch Me in the Morning and Endless Love, to come out still with an album that holds its own to those standards when she was, I think, 55 years old.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
You know, yeah. I'm sorry, she was 51. She was 51. But to be that late in your career and still putting out product that is worthwhile and an artistic achievement, and this stands the test of time. Like those songs are still good, R&B and pop songs. I think that's really an achievement. So that's, I think, my favorite Diana Ross album.
Well, like I'm prone to say, good is good, no matter what the time frame. And some things are popular in certain times, but if it's good music, it's going to last us, you know, stand the test of time. And obviously Diana Ross has and does.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting because some of the guys that, I said earlier, I love to make podcast, playlists. Some of the guys on my podcast, the younger guys, Lucas and Sterling, I made a playlist for them called, I don't know if we can swear on your podcast.
Of course you
can. So it's called Fuck Off, Fuck Boys. And it's just about guys that like are not worth your time.
Yeah.
And it's like a 2-hour playlist of like scorned lover songs, essentially from divas. And it's funny because they're in their early 20s and don't know much from, you know, Diana Ross. But I put If You're Not Gonna Love Me Right on there from that album, Take Me Higher, and they love it. Like it's on there right next to, you know, Everyone from Today. And they're like, this song is such a jam. And so, you know, 25 years later, it's still holding the test of time.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. So number one, the big number one, and I guess they don't get much bigger than this person as well. Whitney Houston, My Love Is Your Love.
Ah, yes. Definitely one of my favorite albums of all time. My Love Is Your Love came out in 1998, and Whitney had so many hits. I mean, The Bodyguard had already been out, Waiting to Exhale, Preacher's Wife, but her last studio album was in 1991 with I'm Your Baby Tonight. And then she just got into movies and really got away from recording studio albums. So all the music we have from Whitney in the mid 90s is for a soundtrack that's tied to a movie and themed to that movie. And she, you know, kind of got into this ballad moment. And, you know, with Waiting to Exhale, those were ballads. Preacher's Wife was a lot of gospel music and, again, adult contemporary ballads like I Believe in You and Me. Yep. So she had really moved into that adult contemporary track, where sort of Celine and Gloria were, Mariah to a certain extent. And she wasn't necessarily, you know, she was extremely accomplished, definitely one of the greatest of all time, even at that point from The Bodyguard, but she wasn't like hip. She wasn't cool, you know? And so
wasn't gospel a really big influence for her?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And she got to do a whole album of that really with The Preacher's Wife. And that was the album that preceded this. And so she was extremely accomplished, but I think that she was only in her mid 30s at this time. So she wasn't really very old yet, but she had already done so much that it was almost as if she had already peaked really with The Bodyguard. And so it was like, okay, well, you know, is Whitney still viable on the radio? Does she still have something to offer? And Clive Davis, who is, you know, Arista Records and discovered Whitney, was still running her career. They set out to do a greatest hits because she had never had a greatest hits album out. And they were going to just record a few songs for the greatest hits. And when they put out to have songwriters submit, because Whitney didn't write any of her music, So when they asked artists to submit songs to just be bonus tracks, essentially, on this greatest hits collection, they got so many songs that they had more than an album's worth to choose from. So the album was recorded really fast. It was done in 6 weeks, and it has some of the best artists of the 1990s as writers and collaborators on that album. And it made for one of the greatest albums of her career. So on that album, you have Babyface, you have Lauryn Hill, you have Wyclef Jean, you have Missy Elliott. So some of the real profound artists and collaborators of the 90s are all right there on that album. Yeah. And it made her hip again. It made her cool again with songs like, Heartbreak Hotel, My Love Is Your Love, It's Not Right But It's Okay, which was like a mid-tempo R&B that, Chris Cox and from the Thunderpuss collaboration remixed into this club banger that just was a massive hit here in the US in the summer of 99. So that ended up being like a huge, huge era for her. And I think one of the coolest eras of her career, as an R&B artist. I think that it's definitely my favorite. And again, what I loved about Take Me Higher from Diana Ross, Whitney sort of does here. You get a little bit of everything that she's great at on this album. You get the adult contemporary, the inspirational bits, the R&B bits. So it's really a little bit of hip hop. It's really, really a great album.
Whitney Houston, unbelievable voice and such a tragic end, unfortunately. But at least she has a legacy that will stand the test of time in terms of good music, which is fantastic. So. Yeah,
and I have to say, too, I'll say about Whitney is I actually think she is the greatest voice we've ever had and may ever have. I don't know that we'll ever have somebody that will be as great a singer as Whitney Houston. And that is, withstanding my personal affection and relationships with artists like Gloria Estefan and Diana Ross. I think that she just was the greatest at using her instrument, because there's tons of other amazing vocalists. Yep. Adele, Beyonce, Christina Aguilera, who you mentioned, Jennifer Hudson, so many people that could do maybe technically what Whitney could do as far as like what notes can you hit and what is the power of your belt. Whitney, her musicianship was knowing what exactly to do with that instrument to make you feel something, and the way she knew how to use it, and also the tonality of her voice was very unique and a gift, and the way that she could go from her falsetto to her mix to her lower range just all in one breath. Yeah. She was really, really incredible. I mean, like we talk about Olympic athletes, she was like an athlete of voice. Yeah. So I don't know that we'll ever see anyone that can use their instrument the way she did. She was really, really incredible, and definitely so tragic, the circumstances that we lost her.
All right. Well, there we go. That's your 10. I'll recount the 10 for everybody. So it's number 10, Brandy, Never Say Never. Number 9, Tony Braxton, Secrets. Shania Twain at 8 with Come On Over. 7 is Madonna, Ray of Light. Number 6 is Janet Jackson, Velvet Rope. Mariah Carey at 5 with Butterfly. Gloria Estefan with Destiny at 4. 3 is Celine Dion, Falling Into You. Number 2 is Diana Ross, Take Me Higher. And number 1, Whitney Houston, My Love Is Your Love. I'm not going to question anything about any of those. Your knowledge is unparalleled, and I have really had a fantastic time going through the list with you, because I've learned so much as well, it's been great. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you again for coming on the show and agreeing to do this. And we finally got to catch up. It's taken a little while since last year, but that's great. It's made it all that more rewarding once we did finally catch up.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so thankful to you, Darren, for having me on your show. I think it's really a cool concept that you've got going here. And I hope I wasn't too long-winded about my divas. Once you get me started, fine. It's hard to...
Yeah, that's
you can edit me down if you need to. But no. I really had a good time chatting with you. And in these COVID times, there's not much to do here in New York. So this was a very fun way to spend an evening. So I'm very grateful to you.
All right, not a problem. Well, if you want to let everybody know, well, actually, before we do that, I have a question I'd like to ask of everybody. What are you listening to, reading or watching at the moment that has your interest? Because you are, I guess, in a bit of lockdown still. You've got plenty of free time on your hands. What's taking your fancy at the moment?
Oh my goodness. So at the moment, some of my favorite shows that I've watched during quarantine, I love The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel on Amazon Prime. So funny. I loved on Apple TV. There's one called The Morning Show with Jennifer Aniston, and it's sort of about like morning show culture. It's a drama. It's kind of about the Me Too movement.
Oh, okay.
And that's brilliant. I loved that. Of course, Schitt's Creek, I'm like rewatching because it still makes me laugh every time.
Yeah.
So those are sort of the TV picks that I am loving. And then above and beyond that, I'm trying to think, what am I listening to right now? Yeah. Reading. I'm going to come back to reading because I have to get the exact author's name. I'm going to grab the book, literally. But listening to, I've already started curating my Pride playlist for this upcoming year. Yep. I take about 6 months. So I'm listening to a lot of like divas and remixes.
Cool. As expected.
So yes, absolutely. But reading, where is this book that I just read? Let's see. Oh, here it is. Okay. I just read a book over the summer called Swimming in the Dark. And it's by Thomas Jadrowski. And it's about sort of a love story that takes place in Poland, like in, times gone by in the political climate there. Okay. So I loved that. So highly recommend that.
Nice.
And then also just reading Mariah Carey's memoir, the meaning of Mariah Carey. Yeah. Always, so dramatic.
Yes.
I loved also, for anybody that might be more interested in divas, there's also 2 other books. There's this book called That's What Friends Are For, and it's written by a friend of mine called Patrick Riley, who worked on the Oprah show. He's been a guest on my podcast, and he's had an opportunity to meet and work with a lot of great divas. And he tells his personal stories about the divas that influence him and that he's gotten to work with in his career. And that's an incredible book.
Okay.
And then a book called A Song for You by Robin Crawford, which is about, it's Whitney's best friend growing up and through her career. And it's about sort of their friendship and also their romance in the early part of Whitney's life as well. So that's very, very interesting. So those are my reads, my watches.
And your listens. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
If you want to let everybody know where they can reach you, where they can find the show and anything else that you're working on at the moment, feel free to plug away right now.
Oh, amazing. Okay. So everyone can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Sean, SEANL show. Very excited to share everything there. I've started live tweeting RuPaul's Drag Race on a weekly basis. That, yes. So I'm doing that. And then on Instagram, that's where I let you know all about my podcasts and my upcoming shows. And the link in my bio will take you to my podcast, which can be found on Spotify, Apple, many other podcast platforms, and Anchor as well. That's where I host all of my files. So anchor.fm/Sean L Show will take you there as well. So yeah, that's where I am. I hope people will check out the podcast and learn more about my musical tastes and funny gay sex stories.
Well, it's as I said, it's an eye-opener to me, but it's been very enjoyable to listen to your show and a lot of fun. Thank you again for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. You look after yourselves, stay safe in that city of yours at the moment, and hopefully we can continue to chat on the socials as we go forward.
I will look forward to that, Darren. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, mate. You have a good day. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap. I told you it was a fun one. And if you're in any doubt on whether Sean knew his stuff when it came to the divas, then you're not anymore. He has a wealth of knowledge on the topic, and I was pleasantly surprised how interesting he made the discussion for me. I was a little apprehensive when I saw the topic he chose, but it ended up being one of my favourite countdowns. And don't forget to check out Sean's Spotify playlist. I'll put the link in the show notes. As usual, please subscribe to the show if you can, or tell someone else about the show that you think might be interested. Also, let me know what I can do to make the show better. As I said last week, I'm all ears and ready and willing to adapt and improve. There is a Patreon and a Buy Me a Coffee page, so you can support me there if you're able. However, I'd just love to have more people listen, and for you to let me know what you would like to hear, either from the interview shows or from the review and recommend shows I also offer here in the same feed every other week. Thanks again for listening, and I'll chat at you again next week.